Last week, we dug into the roots. We named the gap between who you were and who you are now. And we found the one person that gap was meant for. But knowing who you're talking to isn't the same as knowing where you're taking them. That's the mistake I see next, right after the root stage. People know their person and then they try to teach that person everything. And I know because I've been there. Today, we're going to build the trunk. This is the part of the framework that starts giving your learning experience its actual shape. And it starts with one decision, A to B, not A to Z. Welcome back to Learning Experience Design for Changemakers. I'm Renee Koster, Learning Experience Designer and Strategist. This is part 2 of the Roots to Canopy mini series. If you haven't listened to episode 6 yet, go back and start there. Everything today builds on the root stage, where we found your teaching sweet spot and named your one person. If you have listened, you already know your gap and your person. Today, we turn that into a destination. Here's the trap. Once you know your person and you know you have something to teach them, it is so tempting to teach them everything, every skill, every nuance, every edge case. That's A to Z. A to Z is exhausting. It's exhausting to build. It's exhausting to learn from. It actually works against your learner because they can't hold Z in their head while they're still standing at A. This is why we talked about the ecosystem of offers back in the Roots episode. You can't give everything in one container. One offer does one job. So for this offer, this course, this program, this resource, we are not going from A to Z. We are going from A to B. A is where your person is starting. B is the one specific reachable transformation this particular offer is responsible for. Not their whole future, not everything they'll ever need from you, just this next reachable point. So it might be helpful to once again look at your own journey. If you're using that gap in your own knowledge and what you've learned, that teaching sweet spot, once you found that beginning point, where were you 2 to 3 years ago? Where is the next memorable piece in your journey? Is that an attainable place for your clients to get to in one container? Have a think about that. Pause, reflect. That is one way that you can understand what that transformation is, where you want your learner to get to next. It has to be reachable. They have to be able to see it as the light at the end of the tunnel, not the end point on their roadmap. Think of it in that terms. The B is the end of the tunnel or the end of the bridge. It's just that next piece. So from where your learner is sitting right now in A, what's that light? What is that next piece that is going to help them continue on their journey? What is the next piece that they are going to celebrate as a win and be motivated to continue? Once you know that A to B, the next question is, how do they actually get there? This is where milestones come in. A milestone for me is a skill or a mindset that your learner needs to grasp or be able to do in order to reach that overall transformation of your course, digital resource, membership, staff training. Go back to that roadmap. Milestones are your pit stops. They give your learner and you a way to see the distance in steps instead of starting the whole road at once. So let me clarify that a little bit. Your experience is the overall map. So say you have a picture of your home country. That map of that country, that's your experience. Now you have an individual who is in your teaching sweet spot and you want to get them on a journey. Where they are now is the starting point, and their end point is somewhere in your map, and you have to get them there. So you pick a point B in your map that's attainable, digestible, and actionable for your learner. And it's going to require pit stops. You're going to have to stop and refuel, take a look at your directions, and map out the next piece. So, where in that journey are you going to place those milestones? What pit stops do your learners, your students need to make in order to finally get to that destination in your map? If you've ever been across the Chesapeake Bay, coming or going to Virginia Beach, Norfolk area, picture that system of tunnels and bridges. I don't remember which way it goes, but you go over the bridge and then you go through the tunnel, then you go over another bridge and through another tunnel. Your person's A to B journey is like crossing that system. It's crossing the bay. Your learning experience container is going to get them there. That's that whole bridge network, but they can't do it all at once. So you've got to take them through the bridges and the tunnels in order to get there. I imagine the next question that's going to come up is, how many milestones am I going to meet? And that all depends on the container that you're building or the transformation that you're designing. For example, you're building a self-paced online course that takes someone from freezing up every time they have to speak in front of a room to being able to deliver a 10-minute talk without hiding behind their notes. That is your A to B journey. Milestone 1 could be a mindset shift, understanding what's actually happening in their body when the fear hits. So it stops feeling like a personal flaw. The action tied to it, they name their own specific trigger and write it down. So these actions don't have to be complicated, and they can be customized and personalized, even if it's an online asynchronous learning experience. Then milestone 2 might be a skill. Structure a talk using a simple, repeatable framework instead of starting from a blank page. They outline a real talk on a topic that they're comfortable with using that framework. That framework gives them support to get through that milestone and be able to achieve that action. And then reinforcing that mindset shift from milestone 1. Then milestone 3 is the application. Take that outline and say it out loud, not in front of an audience, just to yourself, or maybe record it. That action of themselves doing a full run through and possibly listening back reinforces the other 2 milestones and helps them complete the journey and prepares them for the next step in getting through their fear of public speaking. So 3 milestones, 3 pit stops, each one paired with something that they actually do, not just something they've read or listened to. By the time they reach B, they haven't just learned about public speaking, they've already practiced the talk once. So one of the things I've kept saying throughout this episode is action oriented, and that's on purpose, because you don't want to save all the action taking until the end of your learning experience. That's going to cause a number of problems for both you and the learner, and we'll dive into those in future episodes. But if you've been listening to this show for a while, you've noticed that I ask you to pause and take an action step over and over. That's not just a habit, that is the model. I am modeling what I feel is good learning experience, because learning is not passive. You can take in information passively, but true learning takes action. And the more action someone takes as they move through a process, the more it actually sticks. In learning design, we call that sticky learning. The goal isn't just for someone to recite facts back at you. We want people to take in information, remember it, understand it, recall it, and then apply it, which is the highest level of learning. Can they do the thing? So if we go back to our other example, can they get through a talk outline? Can they then prepare for a public event? That's exactly why milestones matter so much. When you break the transformation into clear steps, your learner can take it in smaller bites, take action, take an action at each one and actually apply what they're learning instead of just collecting it. So think about that public speaking example. If you just gave videos talking about the mindset and talking about delivering, completing an outline without actually having to do it, and then you said, okay, we've covered mindset, we've covered outlining, now talk. They might feel a little overwhelmed. But by giving them clear breaks, clear chunks throughout that learning, it prepares them for that bigger last step. A quick aside here, because a friend pointed this out to me, and I'm very grateful, and I think it matters. Not everyone can pause and take notes the moment I ask them to here on this podcast. She was listening to the show while weeding her garden. She couldn't exactly stop mid weed and grab a notebook. Same thing if you're driving to work or running errands, you can't pull over every time I ask you to reflect. So here's what I want to offer you instead. If you're somewhere you can't pause right now, that's completely fine. Keep listening. But if this episode is landing for you and you do want to go through the action steps and apply it, set aside time on your calendar to come back and listen a second time, somewhere that's safe to pause with your notebook or whatever you use to take notes. And if you don't want to re-listen to the whole thing, if you are short on time and you need to break this, go from the 10 to 15-minute episode to a quick 5-minute reflect here, another 5-minute reflect here, there are timestamps in the show notes. And if you're on Apple Podcasts, this episode is already broken into chapters. So you can jump straight to the actions that you want to look at and take. So let's recap what we've covered. We're going from A to B, not A to Z. Milestones as the skills or mindsets your learner needs to reach that B. And milestones need action built in. We don't save all the doing for the end. And there's one more piece underneath all of this, and it's the same principle behind why this podcast sounds the way it does. Along with sticky learning, we want to chunk learning, break it into digestible points. Roughly 10 minutes is the sweet spot. That's on purpose. You'll notice that my episodes run 10 to 15 minutes. Past 15 minutes, I start to lose you, and I don't want to lose you. The same thing is true for your milestones. Each one should be a chunk of information and action that your learner can actually hold on to, not a fire hose. Everything so far has been about what milestones do for your learner, but milestones do just as much for you, the person designing the experience. Once you've broken your A to B journey into milestones, every decision about content, engagement, interaction gets easier. You can ask yourself, what does this piece of content actually need to do? Which milestone is it serving? This is just as useful if you're revising something you've already built. Name the milestones, A, B, and C. Then look at what's already in there. Does this video help them with A, B, or C? Yes? Keep it. No? Get rid of it or save it for a later time. Save it for another tree in your ecosystem. Remember the crashing waves of information I talked about a few episodes back? Everything you know all at once with no structure and just overwhelming yourself and your learner. Milestones are going to help you channel that. They're going to give the water somewhere to go. So, again, the trunk starts with A to B, not A to Z. One clear, reachable transformation instead of everything you know. Then you break that journey into milestones, the specific skills or mindsets your learner needs with action built into each one, chunked into pieces they can actually hold. Next time, we head into the canopy, where all of this finally turns into the actual engagement and content your learner will experience. If this gave you a clearer next step, hit follow so you don't miss it. And if you want to tell me the A to B journey that you landed on, you know what to do. Reply to any email from me with podcast share in the subject line. I read and respond to everyone. Thanks for spending this time with me and happy designing.